You were told health starts in your gut, but if you're a woman, it all starts with your hormones. When your hormones are off, everything is off, including digestive issues, mood, mental clarity, energy levels, weight management, and so much more. As the new year approaches, imagine hitting refresh and supporting your body with optimal hormone balance. Hormone Harmony is a game changer for women struggling with hormonal imbalances that leave them exhausted both physically and mentally. It only contains science-backed ingredients that bring back comfort, energy, clarity, confidence, and a sense of balance. Perfect for enjoying the holidays and heading into the new year energized. Happy Mammoth, the company that produces Hormone Harmony, is famous for its zero-compromise policy. No GMOs, artificial fillers or flavors, or any other junk. Only science-backed ingredients in amounts that are clinically proven. The company surveyed almost 2,000 women to see how Hormone Harmony helped them, and the results are mind-blowing. 86% of women started losing weight, 77% said it improved their mood, and 100% said they were feeling like themselves again. And on top of that, Hormone Harmony has over 50,000 raving reviews from women all over the world, with 98% of them saying they'd gladly recommend it to their friends and family. This holiday season, give yourself or the women in your life the gift of wellness. For a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use the code MurderDiaries at checkout. You could try Hormone Harmony risk-free and get 15% off your first order with code MurderDiaries at checkout.
Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration, and use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar, zero patience for slow walkers, those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night, have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
Welcome to the Murder Diaries. I'm Natalie.
And I'm Paige. We've been talking a lot recently about our feed, both on Unscripted and the Murder Diaries, and how Unscripted is going to be moving to its own feed come January. However, after some consideration and some important details on the business side of things, we are not going to be moving Unscripted to its own feed, at least not yet. It's not off the table for the future, but for the time being, you can tune in for the normal true crime case coverage you began listening for every Thursday still, and check out, if you aren't already listening, to Unscripted on Mondays, this same feed. We have a lot more coming in 2026, so stay tuned.
When you're a kid, being the target of a bully can feel devastating. The taunting, the ridicule, the aggression. Bullying creates a negative and fearful environment for everyone. And it's likely that we have all, at some point, experienced being bullied or know someone who has. The expectation is that these bullies will grow up and grow out of this behavior, that some semblance of maturity will take hold in adulthood, and they'll learn the error of their ways, and we'll never have to see or hear from them again. Trish Hanyes wasn't so lucky. Her childhood bully was a girl named Ashley Ruff, someone Trish met in grade school while living in New Hampshire, and then reconnected and lived with when she was in her 20s. But nothing had changed. Ashley was the same vindictive, mean-spirited person she'd been as a little girl. Soon she would have Trish Hanyes snared in a toxic trap of deceit and control. And then one day, Trish would disappear without a trace. Ashley Ruff claimed that Trish was distancing herself from her family, starting a new life without them. But Trish's family wasn't buying it. They knew that something terribly wrong had happened to the sweet, big-hearted, forgiving person they knew and loved. Someone who was always willing to give others the benefit of the doubt, no matter who they were. Had this trait become Trish's fatal flaw? Did Ashley Ruff, the childhood bully turned master manipulator, have something to do with Trish's disappearance? Were others involved? Trish Haynes' family are desperate to find justice for the kind, loving, fashion-obsessed girl that they knew and loved. This is her story.
Used to think it's in my head, but I'm walking with the dead.
Life had been tough for Trish Danielle Haynes from the very beginning. Born on July 22, 1992, to a 15-year-old mother in Stuart, Florida, Trish was the only child of parents whose relationships seemed to be fractured from day one. Because of the instability of her early childhood family life, Trish's grandparents, Sandra, who we'll call by her nickname Sandy for the remainder of this episode, and Stephen Tewksbury, gained custody of her when she was just 3 years old. But even before this, Trish had spent a lot of time with Sandy and Stephen. In an exclusive interview with Haley Gray and Sandy, Sandy told her, "We were her constant. She could constantly depend on us." Trish's great-aunt Valerie also played a big role in her life and was more like a beloved grandmother to her. Sandy and Stephen were careful about how they handled the custody agreement they had with Trish. They never wanted to stand in the way of Trish having a relationship with her mother, Megan. Sandy made sure that Trish called her Grammy or Gram, so that Megan would always be called Mom. She wanted Trish to know that, along with loving grandparents, she had a mom who loved her as well, despite not being able to be a full-time presence in her life. As Trish grew older, Sandy and Stephen made sure Trish saw Megan whenever she wanted, and they never imposed restrictions on when Megan could visit. But no matter how many opportunities Sandy and Stephen created for Trish to spend time with her mother, the one thing they couldn't control was Megan herself. At times when Megan told Trish she would visit, Trish would wait hours for her to come. But her mother would never show up. And during the times that she did show, Megan was often watching the clock to see how much longer she had to stay. None of this was lost on Trish, which had a devastating effect on her emotionally. These early abandonment issues left her with emotional scars and post-traumatic stress disorder that would last for the rest of her life. When the relationship between Trish's parents, Megan and Toby, got too volatile, Sandy and Stephen decided to move from Florida to North Carolina to protect Trish from the fallout. They also occasionally visited New Hampshire, where Sandy had family and property. When Trish was around 10 years old, Sandy, Stephen, and Trish were in New Hampshire for Sandy's son's wedding, in which Trish participated as the flower girl. It was on this visit that Sandy realized Trish really didn't know Sandy's side of the family that well. This epiphany led Sandy and Stephen to move to New Hampshire permanently so that Trish could be closer to this extended family. Sandy has fond memories of Trish's childhood in New Hampshire. She still recalls Trish prancing around the house in Sandy's high heels. She also remembers how Trish would change outfits multiple times a day. Obviously, everything had to match. And Sandy was happy to do the extra load of laundry every now and then if it meant Trish was having fun playing dress-up.
Trish absolutely loved fashion. Her cousin, Cary-Ann, said that Trish had big dreams of becoming a model and would insist that anyone with a camera take multiple photos of her until she struck the perfect pose. However, Trish also wasn't afraid to embrace her inner tomboy. Once, a neighbor boy around the same age as Trish asked her to go frog hunting with him. She did so despite wearing a white dress and white tights. She happily rooted around in the muck and mud looking for frogs with this boy, and she came back, as one may expect, covered in dirt.
Sandy said there were so many good memories of Trish. Not too long before the interview, she was rummaging around in a drawer and found a note that Trish had written her that said, "I love you, Graham." Trish's great-aunt Valerie described her as kind-hearted with an air of innocence. Multiple members of her family had similar things to say about Trish, that she had a big heart, that she was incredibly forgiving, loving, and trusting, sometimes to a fault. Her cousin Cary-Ann said, quote, "Her naivete made her vulnerable, but it came from a genuine desire to see the good in people. She always believed in kindness, even when it wasn't always returned." While in grade school in New Hampshire, Trish met Ashley Ruff, the bully girl that we talked about at the top of this episode. Sandy was wary of Ashley and didn't think highly of her or her family, especially Ashley's mother. Sandy encouraged Trish to stay away from Ashley, but true to her big heart, Trish tried to see the best in Ashley, and she continued to hang around with her at school. As Sandy and Stephen grew older, they became weary of the long, harsh New Hampshire winters and longed for the sunnier, warmer climate of South Florida. Not wanting to stay in New Hampshire on her own, Trish made the move back to Florida with them. Now, we're going to fast forward to 2014, when Trish, then around the age of 22, found herself in a relationship with a man called Chris. Trish's family was naturally wary of Chris because he had just been released from prison when Trish met him. Soon, Chris said he wanted to move to New Hampshire, where he had a job waiting at a restaurant in North Woodstock called The Landmark. Not wanting to break things off with Chris, Trish decided to move with him. While in New Hampshire, Trish picked up a couple of odd jobs. She washed dishes at The Landmark and also worked as a housekeeper at the Villages of Loon Mountain, a hotel in Lincoln. Chris had the only car, and since Trish didn't drive, she would often have to walk to and from work. It will certainly come as no surprise to know that Trish's relationship with Chris was a tumultuous one. Chris was physically abusive, and Trish often had the marks of his violent outbursts on her body. The couple who owned the Landmark restaurant noticed these injuries, and they tried to help Trish. But no amount of cajoling worked. Trish wouldn't leave Chris. At one point, Trish's great-aunt Valerie, who still lived in the area, realized that Trish had no hair. Her head had been shaved. Trish told Valerie that she had to shave because some kids she babysat had lice. But Valerie later learned Trish had been coerced by Chris to shave her head because he was jealous of her being looked at by another man. In 2017, after about 3 years of this kind of treatment from Chris, Trish decided to end the relationship once and for all. She even went as far as to make a domestic violence report against Chris. But when Chris learned he'd be sent back to jail because of the violations to his parole, he pressured Trish to withdraw the complaint. But when Trish recanted her story, the police knew that Chris was the one pressuring her to drop the charges. So, they told her that they would charge her with filing a false police report in hopes that this would dissuade her from dropping the allegations against Chris. Unfortunately, it didn't work, and she was formally charged with filing a false police report. Shortly after all of this happened, Trish moved back to Florida to be closer to Sandy and Stephen. But this misdemeanor charge was still looming in her life, and she wrestled with going back to New Hampshire on a temporary basis to take care of it in court. Her family didn't want her to return to all that trouble up north, but Trish was insistent. She told Valerie, "I want to go back and make it right. I don't want this hanging over my head." So, in early 2018, she returned to New Hampshire to attend her January court date. But just as she arrived, the court date was pushed back to April because the new public defender assigned to her case requested a continuance. When Trish told Sandy about this, Sandy pleaded for Trish to return to Florida in the meantime. But Trish decided to stay. She wanted to deal with her court date and be done with it before she headed south again. While in New Hampshire, Trish had plans to stay with a friend called Becky who lived in Rumney. But Becky lived on a farm way out in the country with no cell service. Becky also worked long days, and this meant a lot of alone time for Trish with no means of communication beyond the farm. When she realized that she would be in New Hampshire longer than she'd originally planned, Trish decided to move somewhere closer to town. That's when she reconnected with Ashley Ruff, her bully from grade school, who was now going by the name Ashley Smith. Ashley was married to her husband, Doug Smith, and the two of them invited Trish to stay with them while she waited for her court date in April. According to Sandy, Trish had doubts about moving in with Ashley. Trish even told Becky, "Maybe I shouldn't be going there because Grammy really doesn't like Ashley." But Ashley's promises of shopping, freedom, and a car were too great for Trish to resist. Trish was always trying to see the best in people, and considering that Ashley was now married with kids, Trish hoped that maybe Ashley had matured beyond her bullying days. But she would be wrong. In late January of 2018, Becky dropped Trish off at a gas station in Canaan, where Ashley and Doug picked her up and took her to the 9.5-acre property they were renting at 225 Main Street.
Ashley was born to Wendy and Brian Ruff. To say her childhood wasn't great would be an understatement. Her mother suffered from mental illness and was emotionally abusive to Ashley. Curiously, Wendy's mother, Ashley's grandmother, Betty, had been missing from Warner, New Hampshire since 1978. Betty was last seen in her home on Joppa Road on the morning of June 14th of that year. She was reported missing the next day. Despite searches by the New Hampshire State Police, among other law enforcement agencies, Betty has never been found, and her disappearance is still regarded as suspicious to this day.
When Ashley was barely a teenager in 2005, her family home was condemned after a health inspector found the residence full of garbage and animal waste. Every floor was littered with trash, rotting food, and animal feces. Loose insulation hung from unfinished walls and ceilings. There was also a rooster living inside. Pornography was tacked to the walls of the upstairs bedroom where the children slept. And outside, officials found goats, pigs, dogs, cats, and fowl wandering around the yard without food, water, or shelter. The state veterinarian seized 57 animals in all, and the Ruffs were eventually charged with 10 counts of child endangerment. Despite this, the Ruff children were allowed to continue living with their parents, Wendy and Byron. In school, like Trish, Ashley desired to fit in, but she tended to put down others if it meant it would make herself look better while doing so. She was known by her peers as an excellent liar and manipulator, and if there was a group at school that Ashley wanted to be a part of, she would viciously berate her friends to impress the group. While Ashley would later tell people that she and Trish had been friends at school, Trish's grandmother Sandy remembers it a different way. As far as she was concerned, Ashley had always bullied Trish. Ashley had her first child while she was a senior in high school, but her peers remember Ashley having everything going for her shortly after graduation, with a good job, a nice apartment, and a new car. But she kept having children. And by the time she started dating Doug Smith, she had 4 total. Ashley and Doug had grown up in the same town, but people who knew Doug steered clear of him because of his troubled past. He was known to be a predator and sex offender, and his lengthy criminal record included things like felonious sexual assault, violation of probation or parole, violation of protective orders, receiving stolen property, resisting arrest, breach of bail, and numerous driving violations dating back 15 years. Ashley had her own run-ins with the law. She'd been charged with criminal mischief twice. In one case, she was accused of throwing a large rock at another person's vehicle, causing more than $1,500 worth of damage. Together, Ashley and Doug were a toxic mix, feeding into the worst parts of one another and egging each other on. Eventually, they got married and had children of their own. And by the time Trish was living with them, Ashley was expecting her 6th child. When Trish moved in, Ashley was back to her usual bullying. It began subtly at first, with Ashley posting pictures on social media of Trish and making derogatory remarks about her in the captions. But then something darker began to happen. A kind of malicious control of Trish by Ashley. The first red flag for Sandy was when Trish began contacting her using Ashley's phone. Trish told Sandy that her own phone had been stolen, but Sandy now believes that Ashley took it away from Trish so that she could monitor who Trish called. And any calls that Trish made were in short, supervised intervals. Sandy could sense a noticeable difference in Trish's tone and personality during these calls. It was so obvious to Sandy that Ashley was there, monitoring Trish's every word. Trish's family found it strange that Trish didn't replace her supposed stolen phone with a new one. Even though she didn't have a job, she was receiving regular Social Security checks due to her PTSD diagnosis, so she would have been able to afford a new one. Prior to leaving for New Hampshire, Sandy remembered Trish living on her phone. She was never without it. And as time passed with Trish living with Ashley, the phone calls became fewer and far between. Sandy wasn't able to get in touch with Trish very often. And to make matters worse, she didn't have a physical address for her either. This was the least amount of contact she'd ever had with her granddaughter. But Sandy was holding out hope that this weird phase in Trish's life was sure to end when the trial date came in April, and Trish was able to move back home to Florida. But in April, Ashley contacted Trish's family and told them that Trish had gone to her court date and would more than likely have to serve 7 days in jail. But after the week came and went, Trish never called Sandy, or anyone for that matter. And then in late April, Sandy had a heart attack and spent a lot of time recuperating at home. Trish finally called, but didn't stay on the phone long. I was home and she was only on with me for 2 or 3 minutes. Literally, Sandy shared in an interview. Abruptly, Trish said that Ashley's phone was at 2% and she had to go. Believe me, I cried for a long time after she hung up, Sandy said. She was heartbroken. May 16th, 2018, was the last time Sandy heard Trish's voice. It was during a phone call, but Sandy could tell that Ashley was pressuring Trish to get off the phone the entire time they were talking. As Sandy remembers, it was a particularly brief and vapid conversation. They couldn't talk about anything of significance or importance because of Ashley's looming presence. After that, the only contact that Sandy had from Trish was through text messages from Ashley's number. It's believed that Trish was deceased by this point, and the text messages were actually from Ashley pretending to be Trish. And then one day, Ashley reached out to Sandy directly and told her that Trish had left New Hampshire and moved to Vermont to be with a new boyfriend. When Sandy asked for the boyfriend's name, Ashley couldn't say. She also said that Trish was purposefully distancing herself from her family because she was mad at them. And when Valerie contacted the Plymouth District Court, they informed her that Trish had never shown up for her April court date. This was cause for alarm from Trish's family. The entire reason for Trish being in New Hampshire in the first place was to rectify her misdemeanor charge in court. For her not to show up for this proceeding defied all logic.
Valerie relocated to her New Hampshire summer home so that she could begin searching for Trish in earnest. She began by calling the local police to see if they knew anything about her. They said that they didn't. She also searched for Ashley's home, but when she asked around at stores in the town in which she thought Ashley lived, nobody knew who she was. Valerie also called Trish's ex-boyfriend, Chris. She worried that the boyfriend that Ashley had mentioned might have been Chris, but he told her that he hadn't heard from her.
While Valerie was searching for Trish, Sandy and Stephen were still trying to get information from Ashley. But Ashley was avoiding all questions. At times, Ashley and her mother, Wendy, would post things about Trish on Facebook, saying how they were worried about her. In one of these posts, Wendy wrote that she'd just spoken to Trish and that Trish wanted her family to leave her alone. By early July, Sandy had had enough of Ashley's lies. She told Ashley that if Trish did not contact them, the family would go to the police and file a missing persons report. To which Sandy asked, "Is that what Trish said, or is that what you're saying?" Ashley said that she wouldn't answer Sandy's questions and that she just got out of the psych ward at the hospital. After that, Ashley stopped responding to Sandy's texts and calls. The next day, July 6, 2018, Trish was reported missing by her family. One of the first things the police advised was for the family to stop the processing of Trish's social security checks. They figured if the money stopped coming, Trish might come out of hiding and contact the Social Security office to see what happened. But this didn't work. Even when payment of her disability checks was stopped, Trish never reached out. When she didn't check for her money, Valerie said, we knew it meant she was in trouble. On August 28, 2018, The Assistant Attorney General made a statement to the media, asking for the public's help in finding Trish. That same day, the New Hampshire State Police Major Crime Unit obtained a search warrant and conducted a search of Ashley Smith's house, where Trish had been staying since January. The police wouldn't say why they were searching there or what led them to conduct the search, nor would they comment on whether they thought Trish was hiding or if she had been murdered. When Ashley spoke to a local news station, she said she wasn't sure why the police were searching her home, but she knew that they had also searched 2 other homes where Trish had been staying. She claimed that Trish had stayed with her in the past, but didn't live with her and that she hadn't heard from Trish since June or July. Around this time, the police received a tip from a woman named Sarah who lived with her husband Travis on Ashley and Doug's property. Sarah told them to search Grant Pond, which is a large pond off Wild Meadow Road in Grafton, about a mile from the Smith property. Police found a washer and dryer set submerged in the pond, which they extracted and treated as evidence. Inside the washing machine, police found what they believed to be human remains. They told Sandy that they believed these remains belonged to Trish and asked Sandy not to tell anyone. Sandy provided the authorities with a DNA sample from Trish, and in January of 2019, nearly a year after Trish had moved back to New Hampshire and took up residence with Ashley and Doug Smith, the police revealed that a jawbone had been discovered inside the washing machine and that dental records confirmed this jaw belonged to Trish. The autopsy performed on the remains estimated that Trish had been murdered sometime in May of 2018 and then dismembered. This information was only shared with Sandy and Valerie, and for the next 9 months, the police, as well as Trish's family, pretended publicly that Trish was still missing and that they were still searching for her. During this time, they kept hearing from people who were saying things like, "We just heard from Trish." But the police knew these were lies.
This was a very emotionally taxing time for Sandy, who said that not being able to share Trish's remains had been found had been a tremendous burden for her. The family wondered if maybe more witnesses would come forward if the public knew that Trish had been found.
Frustrated with the secrecy and lack of movement in Trish's case, eventually Valerie leaked that investigators had found Trish's remains to the local news. The reporter went to the Attorney General's office and said that the station would break the news at 11 p.m. if more information wasn't released about their findings. So, at 7 p.m., the Attorney General gave a press conference that said they were now working Trish's case as a murder investigation. From the moment they realized Trish was missing, her family worked tirelessly to gather tips of their own to find out what had happened to her. During this time, they learned some pretty disturbing things, including news that Ashley and Doug had been abusing Trish while she was staying with them. Valerie spoke with someone named Faith who told her that she'd seen Doug backhand Trish across the head and face. A few of Ashley's kids also told the police that they had seen Trish being punched in the face. A woman who lived in Salisbury said she met Trish at another person's house in the spring of 2018. This woman said that Trish had been terrified and unkempt. She also said Trish wouldn't make eye contact. This same woman has also had a restraining order issued against Ashley. Witnesses have told Trish's family that Ashley was one of the most abusive toward Trish. Ashley would accuse Trish of trying to romantically steal Doug away from her, claiming that Trish had even slept with both Doug and Travis, the man who lived on the property with Sarah, who gave the tip about searching Grant Pond. These accusations always accompanied some kind of physical abuse. Travis and Sarah were witness to a lot of Ashley and Doug's treatment of Trish, some of which included Trish being forced to take care of Ashley and Doug's 5 children. Ashley and Doug routinely withdrew cash using Trish's Social Security debit card. Trish was allegedly trafficked to people such as Ashley's father, their friends, and drug dealer acquaintances. Sarah also claimed that Ashley accused Trish of calling one of her children a moron and then began to mercilessly beat her. During the fight, Doug pulled Ashley off of Trish so that he could beat her himself. Sarah said that Ashley often locked Trish into a non-working freezer box, padlocking it as a means of terrorizing Trish.
Some of the most shocking stories of what Trish was forced to endure came from Travis's child, Ricky, who often stayed with Ashley and Doug and saw a lot of the abuse firsthand. He said that Trish was almost always injured when he saw her. Once, he saw an open, festering wound on her back made by a power drill. There were times when Ricky saw Trish sleeping in an old shed in the cold with nothing more than a ratty blanket. Ricky ended up drawing a map of the property and gave it to Trish for her to use as a means for escape. When Sarah saw the map, she tore it up and told Ricky that he couldn't do things like that or else Ashley would become angry.
Sarah also claims that Ashley's father came to the property and assisted in the dismembering of Trish's body, including burning parts of her and placing what was left in the washer that was discovered in the pond by police. In September of 2019, 2 months after the Attorney General's office finally admitted Trish was deceased, a rally was held in Concord, New Hampshire, as a means of raising support and demanding justice for Trish Hanyes. The next month, the case took another turn when what appeared to be threats or warnings were sent to individuals who had cooperated with police or shared information. On the same night, 2 separate vehicles belonging to acquaintances of Ashley and Doug were set on fire. Both incidents were confirmed to be acts of arson. The vehicles were completely destroyed by the fire and burned down to their very frames. The arson continues to remain under investigation, and no one thus far has been charged with the crimes. Trish's case has never gained the traction it deserves, and the lack of movement in the investigation over the years has left her family frustrated and angry. In 2023, they gathered with the families of 130 other unsolved murders in New Hampshire for a rally organized by the New Hampshire Coalition of Families of the Missing and Murdered. Ashley and Doug have never been officially investigated or charged with a crime in Trish's murder case, but they have been a source of trouble in other ways for police over the years. In October of 2019, Croydon Police Chief Richard Lee was called to a house for a report of domestic disturbance. When Lee arrived, he encountered Ashley and another man driving away from the home. But when stopped, they denied knowing about the alleged disturbance. When Chief Lee went into the home, he spoke with Doug Smith, who readily admitted that Ashley had been going nuts. Another man present reported that the Smiths had been arguing just before Lee had arrived. When she saw Lee's police cruiser approaching, Ashley threw her purse, which contained a loaded gun and spare magazine, out of the window. After Lee spoke to everyone present at the house, one witness led Lee to where the purse had been thrown, which Lee gave to Ashley, but he kept the loaded gun he found inside. Ashley would later report Lee to the police saying he stole the gun from her along with $500 cash. But it was Ashley who was arrested for violation of a protective order and felony falsifying physical evidence charges. She was later indicted on the charges and was expected to go to a jury trial, but a continuance was issued and a status call was scheduled for May of 2022. When she failed to appear for that status call, a warrant was issued for Ashley's arrest. She was found, arrested, and her bail was revoked. But 2 weeks later, when Ashley failed to show up for another hearing, she was arrested again. In October of 2022, when police attempted to pull Ashley over for driving without license plates, she refused to stop, leading to a pursuit. Officers deployed stop sticks multiple times in an effort to disable her vehicle. The chase ended when Ashley collided with a police cruiser, after which she was arrested on 2 felony counts of reckless conduct and 1 felony count of falsifying evidence. She also faced additional charges, including disobeying an officer, false imprisonment, and operating with a suspended license. Combined with 3 existing bench warrants and a Superior Court warrant tied to 2 other charges, Ashley ultimately received prison time. She was released on parole in April of 2025.
We also recently learned that Ashley had given birth to another child, a baby boy who was removed from her care and placed in state custody. The identity of the father remains unknown, as Ashley was pregnant during her incarceration. However, there is speculation that a correctional officer might be involved.
And finally, according to information shared by Trish's family, Ashley and Travis are now married, with the wedding reportedly taking place in late September or early October of this year. And then there's Doug. In December of 2020, he pleaded guilty to a string of charges, including a single count of aggravated felonious sexual assault, a single felony and 2 misdemeanor wrongful voting charges, a felony charge for reckless conduct with a deadly weapon, a felony for possession of a firearm, and felony for duty to inform subsequent charges as a part of global plea agreement between Merrimack and Sullivan counties, as well as the New Hampshire AG's office. As part of his deal, Doug was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison and will serve concurrent sentences on some of his charges. Sentencing for other charges were suspended. As part of the agreement, Doug admitted to many crimes beginning in 2018, including voter fraud, failing to register as a sex offender in Grafton, firing a gun at a motor vehicle in Warner, and also the rape of a woman in Croydon in 2020. As of the recording of this podcast, no arrests have been made in Trish's case, and no persons of interest or suspects have ever been named. Trish's family firmly believe, as do many others, that Trish was murdered by Ashley and Doug. Even though police dug up plenty of circumstantial evidence against the Smiths, Trish's family believe that the DA will only prosecute with a confession from the killers. Otherwise, Ashley and Doug would likely go free. Someone no longer associated with the case suggested that there is less urgency to solve it because Trish, quote, wasn't innocent in all this, and that she, quote, made bad choices. Trish's cousin Cary-Ann said, "It's an awful system of justice when the victim is blamed. I don't care if in her naivety, Trish made a bad decision. She was beaten, starved, held against her will, tortured, murdered, dismembered, burned, and her remains were thrown into a pond. No one deserves that, bad decision or not." Furthermore, Cary-Ann's message to those who may have information that can help solve Trish's case is, if you know something, say something. Trish can no longer speak for herself, and our family desperately needs closure. We want to recover the rest of Trish's remains, and we want justice for her. Doug, Ashley, and anyone else involved in this horrific act need to be held accountable. But we can't achieve that without the help of those who know something. No matter how insignificant you think your information might be, it could be the key that breaks this case wide open. And there's an important last note about Trish's case. A fellow prisoner of Doug Smith said that while incarcerated together, Doug told him that he and Ashley killed Trish. This person said he's willing to wear a wire and get the confession from Doug again, but the police have turned down his offer. If you or someone you know have information about Trish's case, call the New Hampshire State Police at 603-223-4381. That's 603-223-4381. You can also keep up with Trish's case at the family Facebook group, Justice for Trish Haynes. We'd also like to send a special thanks to Cary-Ann, Trish's cousin, for granting us permission to cover Trish's case and for her helpful guidance as we put this episode together. Her support is deeply appreciated.
Make sure to follow us on all of our socials at the Murder Diaries Pod. And you can also find us on YouTube. Please subscribe there. We're really wanting to kind of grow that and maybe come out with some more video content for you. Until then,
Stay safe.
bye.